Mark Carney is wrong about carbon taxes. Now, you know that Mark Carney isn't ending all carbon taxes. He wants to change the carbon tax. But don't worry, says Carney, only the big businesses will pay for his carbon tax. You won't be on the hook. Well, here's Carney's problem. Canadians don't buy what he's trying to sell. So your friends at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation commissioned a poll from Leger. We asked Canadians who they think will pay Carney's hidden carbon tax on Canadian businesses. And here's the problem for Carney. Just 9% of Canadians believe Carney when he said that businesses will pay most of the cost of his carbon tax. The problem for Carney, 70% of Canadians said that businesses will pass on most or some of the costs to consumers. Uh-oh, that is bad news for Mark Carney. Now, here's the thing. Canadians understand it. A carbon tax is a carbon tax is a carbon tax. When the government hammers businesses with carbon tax, that makes life more expensive for Canadians, right? Let's just talk through the simple reality. You hammer refineries with carbon taxes, that makes gasoline and diesel more expensive. When the government hammers utilities with carbon taxes, that makes home heating bills more expensive. And when the government hammers fertilizer plants with carbon taxes, that increases costs for Canadian farmers, and that makes your grocery haul more expensive. Now, folks, let's just break down what the party leaders are saying on carbon taxes. So Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre is the only leader of a major federal party that is promising to end all carbon taxes. Now, Mark Carney, let's transition back to him for a second. You know Carney has dropped the consumer carbon tax rate to 0, but the problem there is that the law is still on the books. So after the election, after politicians are done singing for their supper, knock, knock, knocking on the doors, those politicians can come back to the House of Commons and crank up that carbon tax until their heart's desire. And again, the other thing Carney is trying to do is he wants to hammer Canadian businesses with huge hidden carbon tax, and he hopes that you won't notice when they pass those costs on to you through higher prices. In fact, Carney's carbon tax is the worst of all worlds. Now remember, about 70% of countries don't impose national carbon taxes. One of those countries with no national carbon tax, you guessed it, the United States. Okay, so Carney's carbon tax on Canadian businesses will push our entrepreneurs to cut production in Canada, increase production in the United States, and set up shop in the US. So Carney's carbon tax means higher prices for you and fewer jobs for Canadians. Again, the problem for Carney is that Canadians aren't buying what he's selling, right? To recap, Carney is saying, oh, don't worry, folks, just the large businesses will pay for his carbon tax. Well, turns out only 9% of Canadians believe that business will pay most of the costs. 70% of Canadians understand that when you hit businesses with carbon tax, that means most or some of the costs trickle down to consumers through higher prices. So, folks, before the election is over, Carney owes you a clear answer to this simple question. How much will your carbon tax cost? Canadians know that it won't be $0. Canadians know your carbon tax won't be $0. So, Mr. Carney, here's the question. We're waiting for the answer. How much will your carbon tax cost?